New managing moderators can support your channel. I think you just close it. I think it's live already though. Yeah, I think it's live. Yep, it's live. All right, so we're live and we're waiting for some audience. Hi everybody, so whether you're watching now or later, I hope that you enjoy and find this live stream, and I hope that you find answers to your burning questions about upcoming Texas All-State, All-Region auditions. I'm so excited to have my daughter here, Esther, with us.
Hi.
Who has recently been very successful and won a lot of really serious professional auditions. So I wanted to make sure and have the live stream when I can have her participating, because I think she could give you such a wonderful advice, practical advice, not just on how to prepare technically, but also just the whole mental game of auditions, because that's something, you know, I've played a lot, but I have been out of that game for a while. And so feel free and post any questions you have concerning All-State, All-Region, or violin technique, performance, cello, viola. We're here to help you guys. And I guess we'll start with Esther. You'll let us know if we get any auditions. Could you explain how our listeners can enter to win a free lesson with One West?
Yes. So if you see me looking to the side, I'm moderating comments and stuff on my laptop.
Thank you so much for doing that. You're so much better at
doing
this.
that. So, okay. I'm also going to put the link in the chat here, but basically if you want to enter our drawing for a free lesson with for me for a cello lesson and my mom for violin or viola, you will comment on this live stream and also go to the Google Doc link in the description, which has a form where you'll enter your name and email, so that way we have a way to contact you if you win. Because if you just comment, we can't
really connect.
So if you do both of those, we're gonna have a drawing, and we will let you know if you won a lesson. So if you would like to enter for a free virtual lesson, definitely fill out the form and comment. I'm also going to put the link in the chat here.
Will we be able to see like their YouTube name on the form?
So you need to put your name and email, and we should be able to. Yeah. So I guess if your YouTube name is different than your normal name, just put your YouTube name in so we know who you are.
So we can find you.
So we can make sure that you also commented on the video.
Yes, because we will just do a random drawing. My computer techie son, who is a coder, he can do a random whatever program on the computer that will enter enter your information from the form and from your comments, as with your YouTube channel name. It'll enter you in the drawing, and then the lesson will be remote. It will be we have several ways to do it: Skype, WhatsApp, Zoom. There are many ways to do it. So yes. So now let's go to.
I'm wondering if I can. I'm gonna add full name, YouTube username, and email.
Okay, awesome.
So it should be updated now. So it'll say, please type your full name, YouTube username, and email. And that way we can know your full name, email to contact you, and your YouTube username, so that we can cross check. Because you can't just fill out the form, you also have to be active in the chat. So you have to say hello, or like ask a question during the live stream.
So as soon as the live stream is over, we'll remove the link to the form, right? So
yes.
So make sure and do it during the live stream so you can take advantage of this free lesson.
It's a great opportunity. I mean, lessons are expensive, and it's like when you become an adult too and you start paying for your own lessons.
You know how that is.
Yeah, so it's a great opportunity to get some free feedback from someone who's been there, done that, and can give you advice. It's always a really good way to improve your playing. And even if you're on the fence still and you're like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna take the audition yet, this is a good way to kind of gauge where you are, and even like take some of the lesson time to ask questions about, you know, other things, because the lesson doesn't necessarily have to be specific to all state. You know, it's just a 30 minutes of one-on-one time with one of us to be able to ask anything
and
need.
play for us, you know. I wanted to ask Esther about your experiences with the Allstate. I know that you spent quite a few of your school, like middle school and some high school years here in Texas, but your Allstate actually you did in Kansas.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's pretty similar. So, what was your experience when you did win All-State, and how many times did you get to participate in the All-State Orchestra in Kansas?
So, Kansas All-State Orchestra is a little bit different than Texas All-State. So, Texas All-State, I believe, as soon as you're in high school, you're eligible. So, you can be eligible from 9th grade on through 12th grade. But Kansas All-State, you're only eligible from sophomore year onward, so you can't audition as a freshman. It's just like a rule that they have. So and I was here in Texas my freshman year, but I didn't audition for All-State that year for whatever reason. I didn't get super serious about music till later, so maybe I was just like not into it at the time. But when I got to Kansas and I was a sophomore, I was eligible to do it in Kansas. And I decided to audition, and I got in, and I actually did it for all 3 years. So at the end, you get like a medal because you did it for all of the 3 years that you could have done it, since you can't do it freshman year. So it actually worked out like well. So even though I didn't do it freshman year, I still got like the 3-year like medal. So that was nice. But the experience was good. I think it was a blind audition as well for me. So there was a screen up, which I don't know how they do Texas All-State. I'm assuming it's blind. I think it's just audio, so they can't tell who you are. But for us, it was a live audition with a live panel. I think in Texas it's recordings, right?
Yes.
Because it's a little, because it's a bit more, quite a few people. But in Kansas, they had just like a panel, and I think they also did record it. But it was a good experience, and the actual All-State experience outside of the audition was one of my favorites. And like honestly, the first year I did it, that's what really inspired me to become a musician professionally, because I think I hadn't really had the chance to play with people my age of that caliber before, because where we lived, there wasn't, like, I mean, if you grow up in like New York City or something, of course you're always gonna have all these like opportunities and places to be around people your age, like younger kids, school age kids who are like really advanced. But where we were, it wasn't really the case. So it was kind of like in Kansas, and so it was like really cool to like get to go to this like place where all the kids were super high level and we're all serious about getting into this orchestra, and being able to have that experience was really cool. And that's what inspired me, because I think what I liked so much about making music was like the community and making it together with other people. That's why I love orchestra. Like I love doing it together with other people. I don't enjoy like I do like solo playing, but my favorite is ensemble playing, because I like the collaboration. And so I think that's like was a really big inspiration to where I am today.
I have to say, I do remember as a mom, you know, I remember that your attitude about practicing and music changed. I mean, you always loved it because you're naturally gifted, and obviously you come from a musical family. So music has always been, I think with all of my children, all 3 of them, is a very important part of their life. But I remember seeing a big progress technically and musically in Esther after being able to play with the All-State Orchestra. I think I could see that you were very, very encouraged.
Yeah.
And so that's a great, one of the most important things is to keep yourself motivated. It's so difficult as a musician. And the reason why it's so difficult, because the progress comes very slow. There's some things that you can, for example, if you set a goal, and that's actually a good tip for yourself, if you're thinking of how to keep yourself motivated, it's very important to set short-term goals that are achievable. For example, memorize a certain part of a piece or an etude, or learn the new scale today so you can play it more or less smoothly. It doesn't have to be super perfect, but something, bite-sized goals. And that's what I actually do a lot with my students. I make sure and I plan the assignments so that as at the same time, meanwhile, as we're working on of course, on all those long-term goals about making, perfecting their technique, bow arm, perfecting their left-hand technique, musicality, and so forth. At the same time, I always give my students short-term goals that they could achieve maybe in a week. So it's very important to do that and to plan that.
Totally. Yeah, it can get discouraging, as with anything, to just feel like you're not, if you have a really long-term goal and you're just not seeing the progress that you want, it's, it can be difficult to feel encouraged when you don't have those short-term milestones. That's why things like all state, all region, solo and ensemble are so great when you're a musician, as a young musician, because you have, or youth symphony, they're just like milestones that you can see your concrete progress. Like, for example, I have a student that I've been working with that they have seen, like, since we started working together, both the orchestra that they were admitted into for youth symphony was leveled up, and their state solo and ensemble rating was leveled up after we were doing lessons. And that was a great, and of course, like, that's a testament to their hard work, because I can tell them all they want. I can tell them all I want to do something, but it's the student that has to put the work in.
Yes.
But it was really encouraging for them and motivating to see, like, these concrete milestones of, like, I am seeing my progress level up each year, and that's a huge deal. And like, the student also does like all district and they almost made it into all state, but not yet. So we're hoping for this year.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's like, it's a good, so like as Dr. Seitz was saying, it's just a good thing to have these milestones that are not quite as large, because even as an adult, when you're done with school and you have a job, we're always practicing. I mean, you're never gonna be done
yes.
practicing and growing ever. So like, you have to keep, and especially when you don't have a teacher anymore every week telling you what to do, you have to kind of develop your own way of making milestones for yourself, or making like even like games for yourself to get yourself to practice or to do something. Because like, I find that usually when I start practicing, I'm like, oh, this is fun, I'm enjoying this. But a lot of times it's the effort of trying to get myself to sit in the chair and get my cello out and like start the work. So finding ways to motivate yourself to do that with smaller goals, like even if it's like, I'm gonna go to Starbucks after this and get a drink if I practice for an hour.
Been there, done that.
Like sometimes you just have to do that.
So guys, I wanted to ask, let us know in comments. We would love to hear from you if you have any tricks or tips to, getting yourself over that hump, getting motivated, if there are some things that you can share with us, any short or long-term goals that help you stay motivated. We would love to hear about those. And also, meanwhile, I would like to get into the subject of auditions, because, well, before we talk about auditions, I want to give you a huge disclaimer, guys. Number one, I think the biggest secret to keeping good morale as a musician, because in the professional world, and Esther, you are just entering this professional world, and you had to play so many auditions.
Yeah.
So it's a very common thing for us to have to play auditions in the music world. It's just one of those things that we have to know how to do. However, if you equate your success on the audition with your value as a performer, you will get very discouraged.
Yeah.
So it's very important. It's very important to learn how to take successful auditions, and that's why it's great to do something like all region or all state auditions, because I mean, there's nothing like it trains you. There's one thing about learning your rep, that's one thing. Learning your technique, learning your repertoire, learning your H's, learning your scales, learning how to be a good violinist or a cellist or violist. But then there's training that has to do with performance, and audition is a part of that training. So you do have to have the chances of actually doing auditions. However, you have to be very careful how you value yourself during the audition before. So if you win an audition, that's great, and that should be encouraging. But suppose you played, if you felt like you played really well and you made some progress, I know it's very hard, but you have to find a way of being satisfied with that, whether you win or not win this audition. Because if you start really just judging your progress only by whether you were chosen to do this or not by the judges, it will be very difficult for you to stick in the professional business of being a musician. And that's what I want to pass it on to you and ask you. I know you've won a lot of really very, very competitive auditions. And can you share like 3 things? First of all, your tips and tricks to preparing technically for audition, and then your tips and tricks to preparing mentally, and then while you're at the audition, what is it that you feel like matters the most?
Okay, so technically, mentally, and then at the audition. Technically, the most important thing that panels are listening for is rhythm and intonation. And usually, I mean, of course, there's always factors, like once you get on stage, you never know. But the best thing you can do for yourself is making sure your rhythm is good, your tempos are stable, and your intonation is solid. Because the first rounds of auditions, that's usually, and of course that you always want to have a good sound, but that's a given. Like just as a string player, we want to have a good sound. We work on that for ever and ever. Amen. Still working on it. So that is the first. There's the 3 or the 4 pillars, I guess: intonation, rhythm, tempo, and sound. Like those are the things that if you can nail those 4, unless the panel's having a bad day or something else goes wrong, or maybe if you play something stylistically weird that they don't like, you're pretty much gonna be at least somewhat successful in that situation, because that's what they're looking for in that first round.
Can I intersect
Yeah,
something?
sure.
So guys, and I'm not trying to judge anyone or be critical of anything that's going on YouTube, but I have seen some really very beautiful performances on YouTube, for example, for some of the All-State etudes. However, there are a lot of liberties taken by the performer within that performance. And so I want to warn you guys, if you watch, when I record, for example, an etude that I know you guys are going to be performing at the All-State, I try to stay within the limits and try to be as rhythmic as possible, even though sometimes maybe musically I would do something differently. So I would like to warn you that sometimes you might listen to a very beautiful performance, but the performer might be taking a lot of liberties with tempo and with speed. And this, I'm not saying this is wrong, and of course you never know what judge you will get, but most of the time, when it comes to All-State auditions, I think it's a very important part of judging is that the judge can hear that you can actually keep the right tempo and you're not doing ritardandos where they're not written. And so especially with Road 5, there are a lot of recordings going on that are beautiful and wonderful, but there's so many liberties they're taking, which is okay if you're performing it on stage as an encore, but it could get just a little bit dangerous. And like I said, it's definitely up to you what you follow, but this is why when I record, for example, something, or when Esther records, I try to stay away from anything super drastic that takes me away from the rhythm, from the tempo. So just kind of be careful. Again, it's all, you're an artist. This is your interpretation. But I would really, if you're going to use something as an example, try to make sure that it's pretty much, it follows what's on paper.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's really wise, and that goes for orchestra auditions in general. A lot of times, and this is not true for All-State because they don't ask for a concerto, but when you take a live orchestra audition that's like a professional orchestra audition, you are usually given the opportunity to play a concerto before you start your excerpts, and that's the time where you can be really soloistic and show what you want to show musically and technically, and take all the liberties you want. I mean, of course, there's always constraints. Like if you're playing Haydn, it has to sound like Haydn, or if you're playing Schumann, it has to sound like that. But within these limits, I will say, for cellists, for popper, one thing I want to say, and you'll notice this in my videos, that sometimes with etudes, like it's not going to be 100% metronomical the whole time. And I think what Dr. Seitz is saying is really wise, like not taking too many liberties, but especially for us, there's some moments where we have these really big shifts that it is totally okay to take time to get there, because you just sometimes, like there's this part in popper 2, yeah, like it's okay to take, and you probably can even still take it within the tempo, but it's kind of like if you're gonna push somewhere, you have to pull somewhere else. Like you have to make sure that it's like there can be some push and pull, but it has to be within like a conservative realm.
Yeah.
So just like
unless if the technique calls for it, that's a different story.
Or
obviously.
if there's like a big harmonic change, and it like in popper is like super chromatic, and there are some places that if you just blow through the harmonic change, it just sounds really strange. So like if there's a place where it just makes sense to take just like a little hair just to like be like, okay, and now we're back. Like there's a part where it goes da 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 da, and then you're back to the theme. And of course, there's no ritornado written there, but it's like it feels weird to just like go like right back into it. So just use your best judgment, and also ask a teacher, or you can reference like our videos, or you can reference like another student if they're taking lessons. You can like there's lots of ways to double check, but bottom line I think is like double check what you're doing and make sure that you have someone that's if you have a question about whether something is too conservative or like or not conservative enough, like with the taking the time and like phrasing, just ask someone, because there are a lot of people that, including us, that are ready and want to help, and we can kind of give you some insight on that. But yeah, so technically those are like those pillars about like getting ready for the auditions. Those things need to be solid: tempo, rhythm, intonation, and sound. So, and then you asked me, what was this?
What is your mental?
Mentally, yeah, that's right.
So mental prep for auditions, that's so important.
It is. It's really more mental than physical, to be quite honest. When you get to the level that you're learning the repertoire and you can play the repertoire at a high level, it's really mostly about the mental game, like of the audition, because it's stressful and it's kind of that way on purpose. Like they make it that way, which is kind of not fun, but like that's just how it is. And so you have to know how to navigate that stress and how, so like again, it's important to take these opportunities to take auditions and to perform when you can, because you can learn how your body reacts to that kind of stress. And that gives you some insight, like after you take one audition, you know, okay, maybe like my hands get clammy, or I need peace and quiet before an audition, or maybe you don't like peace and quiet before an audition. Maybe you need to be listening to music in your headphones and feel like pumped up. Maybe you need to relax. Like, and all these things you can't really learn until you're in that situation feeling that way. So that's a big part of the mental prep, is just one, taking count of how you feel during, like when you do it, so that for next time you can reference that. Two, doing a lot of mental runs of your audition. Try to, if you know the space you're going to be auditioning in, try to find a picture of it, or if you've been there before, or like do your best to envision the kind of space you'll be in, so you can do a mental run. So even imagine yourself, like close your eyes, imagine yourself walking into the audition, sitting down, playing through all your repertoire. If you need to read your music, you can have your eyes open and read your music, but just have the mental image of I'm playing through. In your mind, make it sound as perfect as possible, because you're in your mind, so you can make it sound perfect. So make it sound exactly how you want to sound, and then finish, get up, and walk out of the mental room, and then open your eyes, and do that a lot. Do that like every day, and that way when you walk into the audition, your brain's gonna feel like, oh, I've been here before, I've done this before. And I will say, this kind of visualization takes some practice and a lot of concentration. So if you can't do the whole audition at first, maybe just pick one thing, or even just like part of the etude, or even if you just want to try envisioning the room the first time, not even doing anything, just take these baby steps to be able to visualize, and that is your biggest mental preparation, is just the fact that you can mentally take yourself there and do it successfully as many times as you want before you walk into the audition. And that the auditions that I've done well on, I have done that. The ones that I don't do is not always like that I don't do well, but I don't always do as well, or I don't feel as comfortable. So that's a great thing to do, and I love that. And you can really take it to however, like when I was taking an audition that I won recently, I like looked at a picture of their hall because I wanted to envision myself playing there, and then I got there and they're like, oh, the audition is not in the hall, it's somewhere else.
Oh no, I did not
Yeah,
know
for
that.
Dallas Opera wasn't
Really?
Yeah, it was in another
So
room.
how was the Dallas? Tell us about
But
your Dallas Opera audition.
It was good. Well, I'll finish your
Yeah.
3 points and
Yeah.
then I can talk about it.
Yeah.
But it was like, but it was fine because I had still ran it through so many times that it didn't feel like so much of a curveball to me. Oh yeah, we're getting some comments about
Also, I want to intersect,
visualization.
guys, just in case if you just tuned in, make sure that if you would like to be in the drawing for a free lesson, you do have to comment and then also put your information into the form.
Yes.
The link, because the form will go out the minute the live stream is over. You won't be able to enter your information in the form, and then we won't be able to enter you in the drawing.
Yeah, so make sure, because there's no way we can contact you
Yes.
through after like this is done. We can't
Yeah.
like message you on YouTube or anything. So yeah, just make sure you fill out the form. But yes,
Yeah.
so but yeah, so like it is super helpful to visualize, and I love that technique. Other mental things that you can do to prepare is just make sure you're getting good sleep and getting up at the, like if you're gonna be like auditioning early in the morning, like start going to bed earlier a while before, so you can get used to getting up early at that time, so it doesn't feel like a complete shock to your body if like you have to play at 9 a.m., which sometimes happens. Like sometimes you have to play early. Like when I did the Sphinx Orchestral Partners audition, my time was at 9, but we were in Eastern time and I was coming from Central time, so it really felt like 8 to my
really?
body, and I had just
That's
flown the day
early.
before. Yeah, so it's like it feels bad to play that early, but you know, like it's just, that's how it is sometimes, and you just have to deal with it. So like but the great thing about like if you have an audition time is you can plan ahead for that, so you can say like, okay, if I know I'm gonna have to play early or late or whatever, I'm gonna like make sure to adjust my schedule so I'm ready for that. Or like just making sure you're eating well. Even like one of the things that calms me down, because I'm a planner, if I'm worried about how the day is gonna go, like I actually make a note in my calendar of what I'm gonna do at each hour, so I can just follow my own schedule, and I don't think, well, should I warm up first, or should I eat first, or should I? So I make a schedule, and I say like, okay, I'm gonna wake up this time, I'm gonna eat at this time, I'm going to do this, I'm gonna stretch, I'm gonna warm up, I'm gonna rest, then I'm gonna go to the hall, I wanna get there at this time. I look at my map, see how long it's gonna take me, get there early. Like, and for me, that gives me release, because it feels like I have a manager who's just telling me what to do at each time.
Because you already have it, and so you have to think.
Yeah,
right?
I just write
That's
it down
a
and
great
I just
idea.
follow it.
Oh,
Of
yeah,
course,
so
like,
yeah.
So it's just like in a note.
So at
or
least you don't
something.
have to think of all those choices you
On
have to
the
make.
day. Yeah,
on
you make
day.
the
That's
choices for
very
yourself
smart. I like
before,
that.
and then that way you're like,
that's
okay,
very smart.
I don't have to think about it.
That's cool.
And it's just me, past me, telling future me what I'm doing. That already did all the thinking when I wasn't taking the audition.
What about tell them I like that thing about where you had the cup with all the...
Oh yeah, that's a tip I got from someone in the Fort Worth Symphony. That is one of our friends there. She told me this really good tip about like it's like an audition excerpt cup. So if you have an audition list, so basically the audition list is just like all the stuff that you're gonna have to play. And for Allstate, I think you know what you're gonna play because you have the
Actually,
cuts.
the excerpts come out like maybe a week before.
Okay, so
And you have to record them, but I think also the order, like they do have the order.
okay, yeah.
But still, you know, it's...
But still, so if you're ever in a situation where you don't have the order, and even if you do have the order, this is still great practice.
Yeah.
So what you do is you put little pieces of paper with each. So let's say you have 3 excerpts and an etude. So you'd write like Beethoven 5, Debussy La Mer, Mendelssohn Scherzo, Popper 2, or whatever it is. I don't know what the excerpts are yet. And then you put those slips of paper in a cup, and as you're walking around, have your instrument out, like, just throughout your day, and then sit down. And this has to be when you've already, like, learned them. And this is just like a practice of, like, how accurate can I play this excerpt, like, right now. So basically you say, okay, I'm gonna sit down and pull an excerpt from the cup, play it once, and then leave and not touch it. Or even if it's a long excerpt, just play the first few measures and then leave, and just keep doing that throughout the day, and see how accurate you can get of, like, picking a random excerpt, sitting down or standing up if you play standing up as a violinist, playing it, and then not nitpicking, just put it away and leave. It's just a really good practice for, because, like, at an audition, like, a lot of times when you get on stage, it feels like, at least for me, I feel like I've never held my instrument before. Like, I just get nervous and everything feels foreign, and I just feel funny. So, like, it's a great practice to be like, okay, I'm walking around doing something else. Now I have to sit down and play this excerpt and then get up and do something else, you know? And it's like, so I love doing that. And also, you can do it also, like, if you want to make a list for yourself, you can pull out a bunch of excerpts from the cup and make your own little list and record it, like, as a round, like a pretend round for yourself. Because when you take a live audition for a professional orchestra, what happens is, like, you have to
scary.
they give you a whole list of excerpts, and then when you get there, you don't know which ones they're gonna choose. So, like, sometimes I'll practice a whole list and I don't play, like, half of it, you know? So, but it's good because,
Well, it's kind of the same with etudes, you guys. Most of you have to learn the whole both etudes in their entirety, which is the best way actually to improve your technique. And then you get the cuts later.
Yep.
It's similar to that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's interesting because I was thinking auditions are kind of like SATs or ACTs. It's not enough to just know all the information. It's so important to be ready to, because it's a stressful experience. And, you know, I wish we didn't have to do it. But on the other hand, as performers, it trains us for performance, because if we love making music, then eventually having to audition elevates. I think auditioning is definitely, for me, is much more stressful than just the performance. Yeah. And so in a way, it's a good way to get you ready for a performance, so that when you're actually, once you got whatever your dream job or your dream stage venue where you wanted to perform, I think if you have been getting ready for demanding auditions, I think performance will feel more enjoyable, and you'll know more how to deal with your stress on stage. Totally. And talking about, so Allstate, going back to Allstate, of course, it's kind of nice that technically you guys record the audition, even though you don't. I know during COVID you could just record as many times as you want and then submit it. I know normally now we're back to the normal process where it's somewhat more controlled. But with that, I would say definitely start recording your auditions at home way earlier than, so at least, like, you could start anytime you practice. Esther, I like you did something where you, like, played an excerpt 5 or 6 times and then you recorded it on the 7th time.
Yeah.
What was that? Like, tell us more about that.
So I had a friend who recommended this technique to me that, well, you practice an excerpt and you learn it well, and then what you do is you play it. So it's kind of like, you say play it perfectly, which of course nothing's ever perfect, but, like, just making sure you're hitting the best of your ability, as, you know, as in tune, as rhythmic, like, as rhythmically accurate as possible, and do that like 5 times in a row, and then on the 6th time record yourself doing it and see how it goes. And I will say, I've had students before that are like, well, I repeated so many times and then I played it again and then it sounded like I didn't even practice. And I'm like, sometimes it does take, at least for me, I can repeat stuff and then it takes maybe a day or a night of sleep to really marinate, and then I feel it later. So it definitely does take your brain some time to make connections. So if you do it and it doesn't feel good that day, don't fret, because the work you're doing is still making a difference, and I am like almost can guarantee you that it'll be better tomorrow if you were practicing correctly, which means, you know, or doing this exercise correctly and practicing correctly too, like making sure you're not just playing through, but you're being thoughtful about how you're approaching the excerpt and the instrument and everything. But yeah, so that's a good exercise to kind of make it like a game for yourself, and also kind of a cool experiment to see like, okay, now that the pressure's on of the recorder being on, how do I do? And it's real. Like, I mean, I record myself a lot because it's a great way to give yourself that pressure of like, okay,
someone's listening.
Listening.
I feel too, it's like the best way for me to get kind of closer to performance experience, because I am my worst critic.
Yeah.
So I know I'm recording, I'm going to listen to it, and I want to get it over with. I'm like, I don't want to have to do it 10 times until I like it.
The other thing you can do is sometimes I don't always get as nervous if I'm recording and I know it's just going to be, when I get really nervous is if I'm recording for something that I'm submitting. So what I'll do sometimes is tell a friend or like a teacher that I really trust and like want to sound good for. I say, hey, I'm sending you a recording tomorrow and I have to do this, like, so, and I tell myself like there's no excuse, like you can't back out. I have to send a recording tomorrow and it's going to be the first take of this list and that's it, and there's nothing, and that will make you really nervous.
That's good.
So that's a great way if you can't like physically play for someone.
That's what actually I do with my students at the university, and actually with my private students. A lot of times I will give them an assignment to actually record, but I allow them to do as many takes. Of course, they can't edit the takes, but I tell them this week, work on the whatever your assignment is, and then record every day and see what is the best you could do in the recording, and then send that recording to me or bring it to the lesson and we will analyze it together. You'd be amazed at how many things you will hear right away when you start listening back to your recording. But the best part, you can be so effective because you could just pinpoint things that need to be fixed and you could go straight there. So you don't have to play through the whole things just to figure it out. So yeah, I'm a big fan of recording. I've been using it for a very long time in my own practice. And I think, Esther, you do too, because even though of course it's not exact 100% representation, and I usually do video recordings when and the same with my assignments for my students, because a lot of times I could see that my bow maybe is too close to the bridge, and that's why it sounds so bad. For example, I'm playing a trill and it sounds really fuzzy and messy, and why is that? And I realized, oh, wait a minute, my bow all of a sudden gets right on top of the bridge. No wonder. So it has nothing to do, for example, a lot of times things that you think are left-hand problem turn out to be bow. And then vice versa, because our hands are so connected and it's such a complex thing, making sound, everything works together so much. And I think the better we are, the better it's connected. So the harder it becomes sometimes to assess the real reason for why something is not working out the way you would want it to work out. So for me, this works really great. And to that extent, we do have, if you visit our website, I usually put that in the link. Along with our lessons, you could also, we're not talking about, we also have this where you could submit, if the lessons are a little too if you don't have an opportunity to, do a lesson, you can submit a recording to us for a critique. There's some instruction on our website. But for today, if you, like I said, if you comment and enter your information into the Google form that Esther posted, then you will win an actual, private lesson, which would be remote. So, yeah. So do we have any questions in the comments?
No questions yet. Just we had a comment about trying visualizing, and then we had another comment about insightfulness on the path to motivation, and some good luck comments. So thank you guys. It's nice to see you guys interacting in the comments. But yeah, no questions yet.
Okay, so then I'll go ahead about we had these wonderful polls. Let's see. Do
you want me to finish the audition questions you had for me?
Oh, yes.
I still didn't answer.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I got distracted. Go ahead. No, go ahead, because I want to pull up our polls and see and tell everyone how we did, because I posted a lot of polls on our channel. Go ahead.
Okay. I think the last thing was just like physically when you're there on the day, what you can do to prepare for that. I think physically just making sure that you do as much as you can beforehand. I don't know, was that the question you asked?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I was wondering beforehand and also while you're right on stage, like
how I'm feeling, or like
yes, how do you, like, practically, what are the things that you experienced that made it worse or made it better?
Okay.
You know, like what can you share with someone who maybe hasn't had experience of actual, like, on stage audition, and what is it to expect and how to work with what happens there so you can be constructive and effective?
I think the best thing you can do is just know that to be prepared for anything, because I think the times that I felt really solid physically, like when I was there during the audition, was when I was so confident in the fact that I know these excerpts, I know this concerto, I could play this in my sleep. Like, knowing that is like what helps me the most when I'm on stage physically, because I know that like I've done everything I can with the preparation. I think it's when I feel that I didn't prepare as much as I should have is when I start second guessing myself and feeling like unsure. And I think when you're on stage, just knowing, like, doing what you need to do and not really caring what other people think. Like, if you need to like meditate beforehand, or if you need to practice, or if you need to like figure out, like, just like be mentally like focused, or if you like listening to music on your headphones, like, you just have to figure out what you need to do to feel physically comfortable on stage. And like, it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. If someone's playing like the excerpt like super fast in the next room and they're trying to like psych people out, like, just tune it out, you know, all those things that you can do. And I think for me, things that worked versus things that didn't, I think for me it really just comes down to like the preparation and feeling confident. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is like, did I feel confident in my preparation or did I not? And usually it correlates to how I perform on stage and how I feel when I'm performing.
So I want to ask you this question. Who do you play for when you're on stage playing audition?
I used to think of other people a lot, but I think now what works best is I just play for me. I mean, and I also, like, I believe in God, so I also feel like I'm playing for God too, like, because he's given me like the gift that I have. So I think like me and God is like the people that I'm thinking I'm playing for them. I try not to think too much about who's behind the panel, which is not always easy or completely possible because you know they're there. And I used to sometimes think of like different people who made me comfortable, which sometimes works. And it kind of depends on the audition and how nervous I am. But sometimes, recently I feel like I've been feeling success of just being like, I'm going to play how I want it to sound and I'm going to enjoy it no matter what comes out or whatever happens. I'm just going to like, and also just remembering like, it's not that serious. Like, it is serious, but like, it's not life or death. Like, I'm going to walk on stage and play. Because I think like when we get that fight or flight feeling of the anxiety, our brain is acting like it's life and death because that's what it's trained to do and it's trying to protect you. But it's like just calmly reminding yourself, like, this is just a small spot on my timeline of being a musician.
That's
and
a great way to
no
say
matter how it goes, I'm going to come out of it and I'm going to get better and I'm going to keep trying and I'm going to keep playing. And it doesn't matter, like, if this particular panel doesn't like me, another one will. I mean, like, for me, like, I advanced in a big audition and then I didn't advance the next couple and then I won an audition and then I took another one and I didn't advance. Like, it's like, it's weird. Really, it depends on like the panel, what they're looking for that day, how they're feeling, how you played. But a lot of it is so much more than how you played.
So it's not, that's what we were saying, it's not indicative, 100% indicative of work. Of course, some of it is. But a lot of times, like, you can't base your worth as a musician on just the fact whether you passed a certain audition or not. Because that was weird. Yeah, I've noticed that you know.
And that's common for like so many people.
Yeah.
Like most people have journeys that look like this. Like they're not like, oh, you steadily are getting. It's more like there's like a general trend upward, and it kind of goes like this. At least, and that's what I've noticed in my life and in the like lives of my friends and who are also in the industry. And
I've noticed that even like thankfully I don't have to play these very stressful auditions anymore, but you know, every performance, every day, you know, being a musician, you practice every day, you want to achieve something new, something great every day. And on myself too, you know, it's like this, it's never just straightforward. And but that's why it's so gratifying, I think, because there's so much, there's just never end as to how good or how bad you can be.
Yeah.
So it's always so I wanted to share some of the results of the polls. I know you've been really great participating in the polls. 4 weeks ago, I posted the poll about what's your all-state, all-region prep strategy, and I really like the results. So 40% of you do all-state region rep, scales, arpeggios, and new solo rep. This is wonderful. Then 31% is doing all-state region rep and scales and arpeggios, and then 29% only practice all-state region rep. So which is each one, of course, whatever works for you, but I was happy to see that quite a lot of you guys are looking at your summer as not just specifically for all-state, all-region, but also to kind of get a head start for the rep that you'll need during the year. And I think that's what I've always done, you know, as a kid, you know, growing up in a different country. But, you know, I always took even more lessons, violin lessons during the summer. And we kind of, with my teachers, we kind of went over just the notes, you know, the notes, rhythms, learning, like whatever pieces I was gonna perform during the, you know, school year, or I needed to audition with. Summer was the time when we practiced my technique, to elevate the technique, when we practiced our etudes, when we practiced all of the notes and rhythms, and that we could do all like kind of like we call it text. That means whatever's on the page. So I was able to do. And then once the year started, then we went to polish it up and just to work on more complex issues and more sophisticated issues like phrasing and bowings and just training yourself performing it. And so I think I was very happy to see, I think it was a very good poll. We had 45 votes, and so I was happy to see that.
Before you move on to the next poll, I have a question from Rosia Nordquist. They said, hello, I just joined a few minutes ago, so I'm not sure if you've touched on this yet, but I was wondering how much time out of one's practice sessions you would recommend dedicating to all-state music. How much time would you spend on scales, other etudes, and solos? So I guess, and it goes with the poll that you were just talking about. So what would you say if you had to outline like your perfect practice session that contained scales, etudes, and solos, and the region and all-state rep, how would you structure it? And how would you...
This is great. You want to...
No, you go ahead.
Okay, so this is a great question, and we were just talking about that. So it depends, obviously, depends on how much of altogether rep you have, because, for example, if you, like back when I was getting ready for a competition where you have 3 rounds, and you have the first round alone, you play like 6 or 7 solos. And on top of that, you have to do your technique practice and etudes. Of course, sometimes you can't cover everything in a single session, so then you have to kind of divide it into a week. But my favorite way, if we talk, suppose if you're in high school and your main thing is your all-state or all-region etudes, then maybe a solo that you're planning to do for maybe later for UIL, and then your scales. Then this is great. I think you could definitely do all of it or some of it every day. So I like to start with scales because they warm you up. And I'm planning actually to do scales, to release these practice packs, one for Road 5 with the D major scale and several arpeggios in it and some double stops, and one for the Mazes, which would be E flat major. And so I would say, for example, right now, if you want to know which would be the best scales and exercises to do apart from your all-state rep, I would look, the simplest thing is to look, okay, Rhode is in D major and Maz is in E flat major. So why not do, and I would go with 3 octaves because those etudes, they go definitely beyond the third position. So you can start there and say, well, why don't I maybe learn, I'll see how I can learn a 3 octave D major scale and a 3 octave E flat major scale. Then the next, I would pick arpeggios. My students always play from 5 to 7 kinds of arpeggios, and we can discuss that later for each scale. So you can start with maybe even 1 or 2 with each scale. So once you have that locked in, then that's how I would start my practice. So maybe if you have an hour, for example, you have an hour a day, then if you spend 10-15 minutes on scales, that's great. That will, especially if it's the scale, for example, today you want to cover Rhode, then I would start with D major scale, right? Then for the etudes, then I would have some technique, which is scales arpeggios, like if we go minimally. Then the next part would be the etudes themselves. So I like to divide them. So the problem with having those 2 etudes, they're pretty complex and they're long, and you don't want to get stuck at the beginning. My favorite way to divide things is in 3s, because then, we have 7 days in the week, right? So if we take, suppose, 1 day off and we don't practice, which everybody should, I take probably more days off than I should, but 1 day you should plan not to practice. So we have 6 days. So if you divide Rhode into 3 parts and Mazes into 3 parts, then Monday you do, for example, a little bit of a scale and a D major scale and maybe a couple of D major arpeggios. Then you do your first third of Rhode. Then you take a little break. So suppose 5 to 7 minutes on D major scale and maybe like about 15 minutes on your Rhode, right? And then you can take a little break. Then if you want to, you could do the same with Mazas. You could do another 10-15 minute session on Mazas, but before that you warm up a little bit with your E flat major scale or something like that. And then so after that, if you still have time left, then you take your solo piece, and again, if you were able to divide it in 3s, that works great because you do 1 part of the solo piece. Now the trick is that you cannot come back to that tomorrow. Tomorrow you have to pick either part 2 or part 3 of the etude and the solo rep. And again with corresponding scales and arpeggios for warm-ups. And then the Wednesday would be when you complete all the sections, and only after that that's what I like to do. I allow myself to start all over. The reason, now you don't have to necessarily do part 1, 2, 3 in a row. The trick is you have to, because then your brain, when you're practicing, for example, and you say, oh, I have a whole week, so suppose I wasn't so effective in my practice on this part of Rhode, I can just do it again tomorrow. No, then no, tomorrow I cannot come back to this, I'll have to do it to part 2. So it mobilizes you, makes you more effective, and also you don't end up being stuck. Yeah. And that's what my favorite things, 3. Sometimes it's not possible, but however you do it. So the 3s I like because then I can hopefully cycle through the whole thing twice per week. But of course, if you have more complex material, you have less time, you can divide it into 4 parts, 5, whatever. Each piece could have different amount of parts. But the trick is you want to cycle through the whole piece during the week, right? And you don't want to allow yourself to repeat the same part over and over. So that's sort of.
And then, so they also asked about like other etudes and solos. So I guess like piggybacking off of what, if you have an hour, basically the best you can do is probably some scales in your all-state rep. Like, because I think you'd probably need like a good at least 30-minute chunk for all-state etude if you want to do like one section really well and really practice it. And if you do 10 to 15 minutes of scales, that's already like 45 minutes plus. So I mean, And then, so if you did that, technically you could do maybe like 15 minutes at the end for like other etudes or solo. But if you're doing just scales and all state rep, I'd say an hour a day is probably the minimum, in my opinion. If you want to do, as you mentioned, Rocio, like doing scales, other etudes, solos, plus all state, you would probably need at least a couple hours to get through all of that. But you can take, so I guess just answering the basic question of how much time out of your practice session, it's going to depend on how much you are devoting. I would say, if it was me, I would say I'd do 20 minutes of scales, 30 minutes of, or I would do maybe 15 minutes of scales, then a 5-minute break, then the rest of the time I'd focus on my section of the etude for the day, just because you don't want to just play through it.
If
you
it's
want
for
to have
1 hour.
if it's the 1 hour.
Yeah.
If you have 2 hours, then you can kind of structure it differently. But I think the main thing is like structure, like planning, having a practice journal, planning your practice. You can even plan it for the whole week. Like, and one of the things I'll do, like if you have excerpts too, or even with all my rep, I'll do like A, B, and C days. So if you have 6 days, you can go through an A, B, C day twice.
That's
so
great.
if I have like 3 excerpts,
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, but like, so I just label it ABC because
So basically,
I'll even put it in my phone calendar, like Monday A, Tuesday B, Wednesday C, and then so just like however it helps you to label it.
So basically, effectiveness is good, but the length of time matters. So I'm glad Esther you brought it up, because yes, depending, the more rep you want to include, the more time you will have to give yourself. And of course, back where I grew up, my goal was at least 3 hours a day. And so, and sometimes it's not realistic for everyone, because for me, it was kind of the only thing I did. And it was like, I knew I was focusing on this. I think nowadays, especially with high schoolers taking summer classes, if that's not realistic, 3 hours, I think with 1 hour, Esther's, I agree, it's a bare minimum where you should probably just focus on your scales, arpeggios, and all state rep. If you want to add solos, you probably would want to do a little bit more time. But the more the better for you. You know, if you can,
the more the better.
Just make sure don't do it all at once. Take breaks, structure, divide it. Yeah,
just take breaks and make sure that you're also doing. You don't have to do it all at once. You can do an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening, or like I'm the kind of person, I like to have it done early so I can like enjoy the rest of the day and not have to worry about it. So I'll like sometimes set aside like 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. as like my practice block. And that doesn't mean I'm practicing continuously for those 4 hours, but that's my practice time. And that's when I'm doing the practice. As long as I don't have rehearsal or something, then maybe it would be a different time of day. But like if I can, that's the time I like to practice. But if you have school, of course, that's going to differ. If you're a morning person and you can get up early before school to practice, I have friends who did that in high school. Because after school, sometimes I was just like so tired. And I would rather spend like my best energy like on the cello than like math, which is like, you know, I'm not saying don't study.
Well, actually, this is a real thing, because dealing with college students, I tell them, you know, because not that math is not important, but math is more of an intellectual thing. So it definitely, it requires a lot of like brain energy, but it doesn't require as much physical energy. You have to remember, instrument is a physical thing, so you do want to do that first before you're physically tired.
You want to be fresh.
And so I was wondering, in percentages, so if we talked in percentages, like referring to the question, so what would you say, whatever amount of time you have per day, so what percentage of that time would you use for scales?
I guess maybe like 15% scales, maybe, and then like if I was doing scales, etude, and solo rep, maybe like 15% scale, 50% etude, 15, and then the rest. Well, actually, no, wait, I'm not. Maybe 25%.
25% scales.
25% etudes, and then 50% rep.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I was thinking about clock time. I was thinking about 60.
Yeah.
I was like 60 minutes in an hour, and then I was
It's
like, wait,
hard.
we're talking about
It's hard.
percentages?
Percentages is hard.
Okay, no, I'm just, not great at math.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say maybe like if it was like divided in four, like 25% for the scales, 25% for etude, and then 50% for rep. If you're just doing all state etudes as your rep, I'd say maybe like you could do more on the scales, just like maybe not half and half, but maybe like a little less.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, scales are never gonna hurt you. So even if you did 50% scales and 50% all state rep, like that's also not a bad
Mm-hmm.
combo. Because my teachers in school always said to aim for 4 hours a day was like the kind of like golden. And then also cello, you have to make sure that you're being careful because it is a bigger instrument than the violin, and it does require a lot of like lower back muscle, like sitting, and then like core, and also like your fingers, like the strings are just thicker, and you're also moving like further out, and like so you're gonna use up physical energy that way too. There is a question. Any thoughts on my studying the Allemande Partita No. 2 by Bach for ABRSM Grade 8 violin? Is that is that the... Go ahead.
Oh, I loved the Allemande is the Allemande?
Yeah, it's the ABRSM is the Royal School of Music.
Oh wow, I love that Allemande. I'm not familiar with the Royal School of Music per se, but I have to say it's one of the most wonderful pieces to learn, especially if you're starting to play solo Bach. If you're, you have to be comfortable. Make sure you're comfortable in the third position, and also D minor key. You know, minor keys can be a little tricky. So, for example, if you're working on for your scale, I would do D major, and it would be the same fingerings for D minor, but you will change the accidentals. For D minor, I would probably concentrate on D minor melodic scale most of the time, and also at least 5 kinds of arpeggios to go with it. The nice thing about that Allemande is it doesn't have, I don't remember it having double stops, so this is more of a what we call polyphonic melody. And but the trickiest part, I would say, is the phrasing. It is very tricky musically speaking. So if you want to pick a movement in the D minor partita, Allemande is great. But if you feel that musically speaking, if you're not quite sure, you know what to do there, because it can sound like an etude. I don't know what kind of sound we'll get because we're live streaming. Because the beginning. I can't stop when I start playing it. So there are a lot of things on paper that look very square, and a lot of times when you play it for the first time, it's very easy to just hear down up, and so it's very easy to make it sound like an etude. So that's what I would pay attention to the most. Of course, number one, you want to have the right rhythms which rhythms are not very complicated there. You want to make sure you have all the right accidentals. You want to make sure you have a good addition. I would buy an addition, like a contemporary, a good addition. If you download it from MyMSLP, they have those, but they have old additions, and sometimes they have mistakes. So obviously with Royal School of Music, you might already have that provided for you. I'm not sure how that works. But, so what I was saying, if you absolutely have to learn the first movement, that's very doable. If you can master the third position, but I would say the jig is probably the most musically straightforward. Let me try it again.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the syllabus, they have to pick from a list, and I think the only movement that's on there is the Allemande.
Yeah. So like I said, my experience was that if you, so when you're playing the Allemande, just make sure, like I said, the jig you could hear, it's very straightforward as long as you can play it in the proper tempo with proper accidentals and just a few articulation issues. A lot of times that's a little bit more straightforward. So with Allemande, the most important thing besides the notes and the rhythms is to make sure that you think long phrases, and otherwise that's the hardest thing. It's very easy to make it sound like an etude. So of course, if you have a private teacher, make sure that you play for them, or make sure you follow their instructions, very carefully. If you get this comment that maybe it's a little bit too etude-like, because it takes a while to figure out what works and what doesn't. One of the ways I like to make my students do it is to slur it by the way we think the phrase goes. So I know that's not how you would play it, but if once you stop doing down and up, sometimes you can hear a little bit better where the phrase goes, and it's easier for you to judge where to put little separations and which notes go together. Another trick is if you were singing it or if you were performing it on a woodwind instrument, where would you stop to breathe? Where would it make sense to stop to breathe, and where would it not? So that's your line. That's how long you'd have to keep your line going before you can make a little breath or something and separate the phrase. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, we also have a question from Christian. How would you recommend balancing all-state rep along with college audition rep? Do you have any tips for preparing for college auditions?
Oh, that's a fabulous question. I love that. I assume if you're preparing for college auditions and you are doing all state, that is wonderful, because the etudes that you guys have to learn for all state, they have the most important technical aspects that already, just by mastering those etudes, you're already doing yourself a huge favor, because you're improving your technique. That makes it easier for you to also to play your performance rep better. And going back to the question about how you balance, all state and rep. So this is what I like. And I hated to do that. When I was in high school, my mom would always tell me, why aren't you practicing scales? Because I would just go and play all the fun stuff, the concerto. But then guess what? I would get so sick of playing concerto, because if I learn all the technical things on the concerto, I get sick of it because I have to repeat the same phrase a million times, and then it sounds horrible. But guess what? When you're working on these etudes, you're perfecting so many techniques that you will need to show and to polish up in your concerto or in your sonatas. And so that is fabulous. I'm very happy to hear that. This goes very well in hand. Plus, depending on where you're auditioning, make sure that if you have to play a scale and an etude, again, all state etudes are very, very impressive. So if there's a room for a scale or an etude for in your college, I know we require our those who audition for our programs, we require the scales and the etude. And then, like I said, of course, in that case, you will need to practice more time. Like Esther was saying, make sure you give yourself much more than 1 hour a day. And again, like I like your idea of ABC. It's like I was saying, 3 parts, where you make a plan so you don't end up just practicing beginnings of things. Another thing is take advantage, make sure that you have, I'm sure most of you, I hope, have wonderful private teachers. Just really get as much as you can of private instruction. Yeah. That is priceless. If it's possible, sometimes, I know with Esther, that's what I did, but and I did also, if there's an opportunity for you to contact whoever is a faculty that's teaching at the college of your choice, a lot of times they might be open to giving you a private lesson, and especially now it's so much easier with remote instruction being much more acceptable. I would definitely do something like that to make sure that you know what they're expecting, but make sure do it when you're in a good shape. So because it's also kind of helping them to hear you and letting you, so they notice you, right?
Yep.
This way, when you, a lot of times as a teacher, for example, when I have someone who contacts me and we have a lesson before, it also helps me to see how quickly that person can learn. So if you're all ready and then you have a lesson and the faculty member that you might want to study with, they give you a suggestion and you do it right there, guess what? Then they remember that. And then maybe even if your audition maybe doesn't go perfectly, but guess what? They will remember that you were actually able to learn very quickly right on the spot. That goes a very long way for a teacher.
Great. Well, I think that's all the questions that we've been going
wonderful.
For. Wow, 70 minutes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
so
you guys really.
I hear something.
Oh, wait, one more.
Okay, let's do the last one.
This is about the Bach again from Keenor Spielman. Thanks. Is the phrasing there in the Allemande for the violinist to understand or define?
I think it's an equal sign. Once you understand, then you define. And this is my favorite. I mean, this is way too much.
You struck gold asking her this question because like she is amazing at playing Bach, and like literally anytime she plays Bach, like everybody's like always going like googly eyed because it's so good. So she's the person to ask about this.
Well, but there's a big disclaimer because now that I sort of, like I said, I mentioned I don't have to play it for an audition. So one of the things about Bach, a lot of people, like everyone has their own perceptions about how to play Bach. So you do have to be a little bit careful about if you're playing it for an audition or you're going to be graded. The best thing to do is to really, like I said, if you're studying with a certain person who is going to evaluate you, I would really go to them and really work with them, because not that you don't have to compromise your own integrity, but there's a purpose to your performance, right? So if your purpose is to pass a certain level, I would definitely be very intently listening to their advice, and I'm sure they're great if they're teaching for this school. And but for me, Bach is extremely personal, and you have to remember Bach. His first instrument was organ and keyboard, so a lot of times I feel the bow gets in the way of my phrasing because you have to get away from down, up, down, up, down, up. You have to get yourself first to understand how to either sing it or play it on the piano. Like, oh, my iPad is. So there's so many ways. I would say get away from music, from the notes, and get away from the feel of violin. Either sing or play on the piano. Listen to a lot of people, but listen to many different people. Another thing, remember that even though the first beat is the strongest, but the phrase only starts on the first beat. So most of the time, the first beat is not going to be the most important, musically speaking. This is just a beginning of your journey. So a lot of times, think of the phrase as an arch, right? And so a lot of times the first beat is just the beginning of that arch. That doesn't mean you always have to be crescendo up. It could be diminuendo. So those are the hardest things for me in that allemande. And yes, you have to, what was the question? You have to choose or define? What was it? How did it say?
It's if the phrasing is there for the violinist to understand or to define, which I think like what you're saying is really like hitting it on the head.
So what you mean, I think, to understand what Bach meant or to define what you wanted to do. And I think it's both. Because you want to make sure that, I know Bach was such a genius and we can be intimidated, but you have to remember, without you, it would not be music. It was a bunch of notes on paper, right? Yeah. So it's important to have both. But again, it takes a while. You do have to have respect for the text. I have enormous respect for Bach, and I want to do, but remember, Bach didn't just write because he intellectually put dots on paper. The reason he wrote it because he had an emotion, right? to express. Of course, in those days, they didn't write to express their own emotions. Their feeling, their understanding was they want you to feel certain emotion. That's how they wrote. But still, it is connected. It's emotional, right? So you want it to be alive, and if you're too afraid and too afraid of defining what there is, then it might not sound organic, and it might just sound a little bit too mechanic. So yes, it's definitely to understand what Bach wanted, but also for you to define what it means to you. And the best thing, but like I said, if you're going to be evaluated, I would definitely go and try to make the best out of contacting people who are going to be in charge of, providing feedback, and see what they think about it.
Even if it's not that specific person, just someone that you trust that you could enter for a free lesson.
Yeah.
If you fill out,
Absolutely.
I don't know if you guys saw, but we're gonna end a live stream soon. So if you want to enter for a free lesson, you could play your Bach for Dr. Seitz. You just go to the link in our live stream description for the Google form, put your name and your email and your YouTube username so we can contact you. So you can be entered in that drawing. But yeah, I think, and then they said so helpful, thanks.
Oh, I'm so glad.
But yeah, so I think like the other thing I was gonna say about Bach too is like the phrasing is like listen to a lot of Bach's music outside of just the piece you're playing, and even music from that period. Just the more you listen to, the more you get familiar with just the style. That's also gonna help you to decide if something you're doing is within the style or sounds wrong.
That's so true.
So just immerse yourself, and this goes for whatever piece you're playing. Don't just listen to that piece. Listen to lots of recordings of that piece being played. Listen to lots of recordings of that type of music from that
Bach
period, and by Bach. And there's just so much out there. You can even find Bach playlists on YouTube and just turn it on and really get into it. And because his pieces, you can hear his influence in everything, and you can hear it. It's amazing. So
I think one of the things I forgot to mention, you have to remember that Bach, it's all about the harmony. And so that's where Esther, I'm so glad you brought it up. Listen, make sure to listen, especially if you play piano. That second invention, or which one? It's basically exact same beginning. But there, the harmonic context is right there for you to actually hear. And I think this is what gives you the phrasing, actually. Yeah. This is the secret to phrasing Bach, is understanding harmonic context, which is much easier if you listen to, obviously his organ, piano, orchestral suites. And if you're good at understanding theory and filling in the blanks of where the harmonies are, it will be, I think, harder for you to do something crazy, and you will feel like you will have a little bit more liberty, because it's like a playpen that kind of you put a kid inside. So when you understand how Bach thought about D minor as a whole, and what are the relative keys, and what are the modulations, and what is the half cadence, and all of that, it kind of gives you this safe space, and then you can play around a little bit freer within that space.
Musical liberty within the confines of the style.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like with Bach, it's mostly about harmony.
Yeah, and honestly with Bach, that's the key. I think that everybody tells me to be musical, but err on the conservative side. Yes. Because as long as you don't do anything too crazy or weird, chances are it'll be fine. And there's always going to be something that people are like, well, I do it this way because Bach is so personal, and it is the pieces we play are written for solo instruments, so you can kind of push and pull. But there are things that are common, taking a little time at the end into the cadence, or taking some time in between modulations, or following the dynamic, matching your dynamic shape with the shape of the rising and falling of the melodic line, things
or vice versa.
That.
You can reverse it, but there's always that. Yeah, of course you want to, when you're taking liberties. What I think about it is that it's important, but you want to, when you want the audience still understand what is the rhythm there. Yeah. So if you have a dotted quarter and and an eighth, and you want to make a dotted quarter a little longer, and maybe you want to make sure that your audience understands that these are not equal, right? Or vice versa, if you have equal eighths and you want to stretch out, in the end, your audience should still kind of have some idea of what was the original rhythm there, and you're just sort of exaggerating it rather than making it completely different. And then, of course, sound, you don't want to sustain like you would sustain in Brahms. I think if you just listen to piano, how the sound dissipates. What would it sound like on the keyboard? You know, that's probably very close to what you want, the kind of sound you want on the violin. Because with our romantic bows, we learn how to sustain sound. And sometimes in Baroque music, that sounds wrong. It's a little too much.
All right.
Well, that was great.
A great question.
Guys, you were a fabulous audience.
Yes, thank you for all the questions and encouragement from all of you in the comments. It was really fun. It really felt like we were just getting to join in a conversation with you all. So
yes, please don't forget to enter in the form.
Yep, I'll leave it up for like 5 more minutes if you need to. But yeah, the link is in the description, and you can enter for a drawing for a lesson.
Okay.
Free lesson.
Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you
have a fabulous rest of summer. And go practice.
Bye.
Bye.
If I can figure out how to do this. How do I end it?
There's a little...
Oh, the X?
Uh-huh.
All right. Bye.